A third wheel should be sealed away.
Suddenly, my husband pushed me, and I got locked in the underfloor storage. It was so dark that I couldn't see anything, and I was scared. I pushed hard on the lid, but it wouldn't budge. "Please, let me out," I yelled, but his footsteps faded away, and I heard the front door slam shut. No matter how much I called for help, my Mill, who lives with us, was on a trip abroad, and I was the only one in the house. In the darkness, the word despair was the only thing that came to mind. I was trapped in this small space, unable to move properly, overwhelmed by anxiety and not knowing what would happen next. I slowly felt myself losing consciousness. My name is Emily. I'm 30 years old. I was juggling work and household chores. I met my husband, David, at a drinking party hosted by my friend. David, the life of the party, was a well-liked, outgoing person. We shared common interests in remaking clothes and vintage fashion, and got married a year ago, moving in with his family at his request. His father had already passed away, so it was just his mother, let's call her Barbara, living in their old, spacious house. Barbara was straightforward, never meddling in our affairs and enjoying her time, so there weren't any major issues between us. However, the house was old and showing signs of wear, so David suggested remodeling it.
You'd want a new house too, right?
Yes, the plumbing is quite old, and a new kitchen would make cooking easier. So, we started saving up diligently for the renovation. However, one day, I noticed our savings were being spent. Since we both contributed a fixed amount from our salaries to our joint account, if anyone was using it, it had to be David. Hey, our renovation savings have decreased. Do you know anything about this?
What? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Despite pretending not to know, I could see David was somewhat panicking. Really? Tell me the truth. You didn't splurge on something expensive, did you?
No. Actually, my friend asked to borrow some money.
He said that a family of his good old friend had an emergency hospitalization and needed money. He looked serious and kept apologizing, saying, "I'm sorry I used it without telling you." If that's the case, I wish you had discussed it with me first.
I'll make sure they pay it back ASAP, and I'll contribute more to our savings from now on.
I decided to forgive him, thinking about what David said, but there were no signs of the money being repaid, and his monthly contributions to our savings didn't increase either. I didn't want to nag about money, so I kept quiet, but gradually he even stopped contributing to our monthly savings. His collections haven't grown, so what is he spending on? I wondered, but decided to wait and see. However, our savings didn't grow, so I confronted him about it.
Men have various social obligations, and things cost money. Besides, we can live in this house without remodeling. So what's the problem?
I was surprised at his sudden change of heart since he was the one who initially suggested the remodeling. Moreover, about a month later, he started coming home late using work receptions and hanging out with friends as excuses, and began spending more time away from home on weekends. It's suspicious, but we've been married for just over a year. He can't be cheating, right? At that time, I was torn between doubting and wanting to trust David. Then one day, he came home earlier than usual, was watching TV in the living room while using his phone, and fell asleep. As I approached to cover him with a blanket, I saw his phone was carelessly left open, and I inadvertently looked at the screen. There was a chat open with a cute woman's photo as the icon. Messages like, "Where do you want to go on our date?" were there, along with words of affirmation and heart emojis. What is this? The conversation clearly looked like an affair, and I felt a rush of anger. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen and was looking through their past messages when David woke up.
Well, Emily, what are you doing?
I was looking at those suspicious messages.
What the heck? You can't just snoop through someone's phone. That's the lowest of the low.
Don't try to sidestep this. You're cheating, aren't you? When I confronted him directly, David, who had been so forceful just moments ago, suddenly started to stammer.
She's not that kind of person to me. We just met at a get-together and have been chatting about hanging out with everyone again.
Oh, really? Getting messages about going on a date and hearts from a woman who's not that kind of person?
It's just a joke. You know that, right, Emily? You've done the same with guy friends, haven't you?
I've never done anything like that. He seemed pathetic to me when he was desperately trying to justify his actions and explaining himself. Later, perhaps realizing he couldn't lie his way out of it, he half cried and apologized to me, so I made him delete her contact right in front of me. Promise me you'll never contact or meet her again.
I got it.
I'm forgiving you this time, but if anything like this happens again, I won't hesitate to divorce you. I laid down the law with David. A few days later, Barbara went on a 2-week trip abroad with her friend. It was the first time in a while that David and I were alone together. Things had been a bit awkward since the cheating fiasco, and I hoped spending time together would help us get back to how we used to be. About 3 days later, things with David started to feel normal again. That day was a holiday, and we were discussing what to eat. David would usually say anything's fine, but he unusually made a suggestion.
I'd like some refreshing pickles. Can you get them out for me?
Sure, I'll get them ready right away. Feeling happy, I went to the underfloor storage in the kitchen to get the pickles. As I was doing this, David came up behind me. Thinking he was there to help, I turned around, but then he suddenly kicked me in the back, causing me to fall into the storage space. I was wedged into the small space and couldn't easily get up. David smirked wickedly, looking at me struggle.
A third wheel should be sealed away.
What? I couldn't believe my ears as he closed the lid on me. Hey, what are you doing? Stop joking around. I frantically pushed against the lid, but it wouldn't budge as if something heavy was on top of it. Hey, David, open it up. Was my voice not reaching him? Just as I thought that.
Now I can finally go see her.
I heard David's voice, humming happily. What you mean? Just let me out. I shouted even louder, but the sound of David's footsteps faded away, and I heard the front door shut, leaving everything silent. In the cramped space, less than a cubic yard, I kept struggling. No matter how much I cried for help, Barbara was on a trip, and there was no one else in the house. Eventually, in the darkness, only the word despair came to mind, and I felt myself drifting into unconsciousness. And overwhelmed by anxiety, I felt as if I was sinking to the depths of the earth. 1 week later, on a certain day, as soon as David got home and opened the front door, he yelled out loud,
Well, it stinks. What's this smell? Hey, is Emily not here?
but the house was eerily quiet, with no response from anyone.
Emily. Now that I think about it, she might still be in the underfloor storage.
Mumbling to himself as if convincing himself, David headed towards the kitchen.
No way, that can't be. But it's been really hot lately, and this strong odor. Could it be
As David realized that the source of the foul smell throughout the house was from the underfloor storage, he removed the heavy object on top in a big hurry and opened the lid. And there, the scene was gruesome.
Emily.
When David looked inside, he was so shocked that he collapsed to the ground and became motionless.
Emily's decomposed. I did it. Oh number, what should I do?
He crouched down, holding his head, tears in his voice. What if I'm cussed? Hi, what's up? Did you call me?
Whoa, what?
When I saw him being shocked at my response, falling backward and hitting his head on the floor, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. In fact, while I was struggling that day in the underfloor storage, an old part gave way, and I fell down below. Fortunately, the old house, worn out in many places, worked in my favor. So, after I somehow managed to escape, I was shocked to see the heavy object that had been placed on top of the storage. Incredibly, David had purposely moved the cupboard over it, ensuring the lid could absolutely not be opened. How dare he do this to me? I won't let him get away with this. I thought about how to punish my husband and came up with an idea. I quickly fixed the broken part of the storage and threw several things inside. That included the aged beef he was looking forward to eating, my usual apron, and something else. He won't get away with making me go through this. I then put the cupboard back on top of the lid, just like David had done. Over the next week, the weather continued to be over 90 degrees every day. From the second day, a foul smell started emanating from the kitchen, getting stronger each day. Enduring this stench, I quietly lived upstairs waiting for David to come home. Unaware of everything, David returned home leisurely. He must have thought I had passed to the other side, seeing the house filled with stench and the horrible scene in the storage. I took a quick look under the floor and saw the meat, hardly recognizable anymore, decomposing faster than I imagined, with my apron visible among it. David, seeing me alive, couldn't believe his eyes and kept rubbing them.
Is that really you, Emily? Are you alive?
I'm alive, of course. Did you think I'd just die? If you hadn't forgotten about me, I might have ended up like this aged beef.
I thought I'd done something terrible, but I'm relieved. Sort of.
As David, tears streaming down, excitedly reached for my hand, I sharply pushed it away. Where have you been for a whole week?
I had a sudden business trip for work.
You were full of it. You were just letting your hair down at your mistress's place, forgetting that you pushed me down, right? I pulled out a photo from my pocket and thrust it at him. It showed David and his mistress unabashedly kissing and hugging each other.
Why do you have such a photo?
I've been following you like a detective this past week.
No way. You're kidding, right?
From the content of his messages with his mistress, I suspected she was a colleague, so I kept watch in front of his office. Every evening after work, he met up with the woman from the chat profile picture at the station and went to her apartment after dining at a restaurant, all lovey-dovey. So I captured all these moments as evidence in photos and videos. Now, shall we get everything out in the open? But as I was about to confront him, David suddenly got angry.
Wait a minute. Why did you use the aged beef I bought for something like this? It was expensive.
Don't change the subject. Besides, it's not just the beef in there, is it? Have a closer look.
What do you mean?
Saying that, David peeked into the storage while holding his nose. Then, he lost his balance and ended up falling in. Moreover, he got his foot stuck in a broken part and couldn't move.
Help me? It stinks. Do something quick.
He made such a fuss, struggling so much that his foot went deeper in, crying and begging me for help in a panic. Shall I close the lid for you?
Please, anything but that.
His struggles only made his foot get stuck more, and the overly aged beef began to seep into his clothes. It was also on his face and hair, which must have been terribly smelly. Do you understand a little of how I felt being locked up in here?
I get it. I'm really sorry. Just get me out of here.
David apologized repeatedly, but I wasn't ready to let it end there. Hey, you seem to have forgotten, but did you find the other thing in there?
What's this? No. My treasure.
What he pulled out was his favorite pair of vintage jeans. By the way, these were the jeans he always passionately talked about and carefully stored, saying they cost hundreds of dollars for a pair.
Hey Emily, what's the meaning of this? You know how much I cherish these. They're incredibly expensive. What are you going to do about this?
Well, which do you think is more valuable, my life or these jeans? He got stumped for words and fell silent as I coldly looked down on him. So, my life is less important than your jeans. If you hadn't locked me in the underfloor storage and gone to your mistress's house, I wouldn't have done this.
But this is too much. The smell and stains will never come out.
My condolences. He seemed genuinely shocked, alternating between cursing at me and lamenting over his jeans. But I didn't care one bit. Just then, Barbara, who had been on a trip, returned home earlier than planned. Apparently, she had been contacted by a neighbor who mentioned a foul smell coming from our house, and then she called me to find out what was going on. I explained everything my husband had done. As soon as she entered the house, she headed straight for the smelly kitchen and found my pathetic husband.
Mom, perfect timing. Help me. Emily has been terrible. She's the worst wife.
Oh really? Who's the worst here? Do you even realize what you've done? Reflect on your actions.
David, who had been completely sure his mother would save him, let out a pitiful scream.
Why not? Aren't you on my side?
Barbara said she would never forgive what you did. When I reported it to her over the phone, she encouraged me to take my revenge to my heart's content. Barbara, visibly angry and pinching her nose, pushed David's head and closed the lid of the underfloor storage.
Wait, Mom. Open it. I already apologized to Emily. It's all settled.
He made an unprecedented fuss, even retching from the smell, but she completely ignored him.
This stinks.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done this. After about an hour, Barbara opened the lid, and David, looking utterly defeated, was pulled out by the two of us.
Emily, I was really wrong. I'm so sorry.
Seemingly having learned his lesson, he kept apologizing and clung to me, crying, "Hey, don't get that smell on me, and sign this while you're at it." I thrust a divorce paper in front of him.
Please forgive me. I really regret it. The affair was just a momentary lapse of judgment.
Then tell me the truth. What did you use the renovation savings for? The story about lending money to a friend won't work this time.
I'm sorry. It was for dinners and dates with her. I wanted to impress her a bit.
Hearing his pathetic excuse, Barbara and I both sighed deeply. I knew it. There's no way we can start over.
You mean you won't forgive me if I tell the truth?
Of course not. I can't continue with someone as rotten as you. Even aged beef is better than you.
No. Please have mercy.
Watching David with a defeated look on his face, I was convinced that this marriage was a mistake and let out a big sigh. I'm leaving this house now. Write the divorce papers immediately. I'll be claiming alimony and a fair share of the property. Goodbye. As I coldly pushed away my pleading husband, he collapsed into tears. Afterward, the divorce was finalized. I received $30,000 in alimony from my husband and $10,000 from his mistress. He had spent most of his savings on his mistress and had to borrow money from his mother to pay the alimony.
My debt collection is tougher than your average loan shark, you know.
Barbara said this, laughing. As for me, I decided to pay her for the underfloor storage repairs. She said it was David's fault since it was an old house. However, I paid a bit extra because I had caused significant damage and a terrible smell. With the alimony from my husband and the savings I got back, I bought a condo. Although I now have a mortgage, it motivates me to work harder. For now, I'm enjoying my single life, and maybe someday I'll find love again.